Welcome in, everybody. Let's dive right into it. So lately, I have really been pushing myself to read a lot more, especially after having a few author pals of mine give me the opportunity to really dive deep into their works of sci-fi and talk about them and their stories. Now, all of these are modern works of science fiction, but I feel like there does need to be some appreciation for all the old stuff, right? All the books and stories that were the foundation of modern day sci-fi literature. And when I say old stuff, I'm really meaning what academics would call contemporary literature, but it's really work that has been done in the 19th century and on, in post-19th century. So Jules Verne, Isaac Asimov, H.P. Lovecraft, Ray Bradbury, all those kinds of dudes. But there's also a more modern issue with all of these authors' works. And it's very simple. Reading them is hard now. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Reading is hard. And it's not just because their works are older, but because we have become so adjusted to modernized styles of writing, modern ideas, ways of speaking, methods of conveying ideas. So we've all gotten used to all of these modern ways, and we've forgotten how to basically take in and digest how the OG authors penned their stories. You almost have to tackle a lot of these works as if they were a homework assignment. You've got to really analyze and take notes on things that you aren't sure about or you just straight up don't understand. I know for myself, being an avid sci-fi lover, I really want to understand all of these older stories and do them justice and actually comprehend what is going on in them. And, you know, for my own relationship with the works, I'll take physical notes, look up articles and YouTube videos explaining certain things. I'll go back and reread what I'm focusing on. I'll read out loud to see if that helps. So I'll put in a fair amount of work to really get it, you know, to really understand what is going on in the story, what the author is trying to convey. And then I'll move on from there. So it does very much become like a chore, like I am doing homework, which, I mean, it's kind of silly at a point, but because I could just say, all right, screw this, I don't want to do homework, I'm just going to go get something much more easily digestible. But intellectually, it's like putting down that nasty ass lettuce wrap that's got 3 different kinds of spinach and zucchini and artichoke in it, and throwing that in the garbage, and then going to the local burger shack and grabbing a triple meat, triple cheese with all kinds of sauce. And it's good, it's tasty, but it's going to kill you over a while. And the same thing can be said with the older styles of science fiction literature versus the newer stuff. Newer stuff, it's a lot easier to digest. It's a lot tastier. It's a lot more visually pleasing and mentally stimulating. But the older stuff, it's survived for a reason. It's because whenever you consume it, it is intellectually healthy for you. It pushes what your mind can visualize. It helps you grow that capacity to understand and to comprehend. And even if you don't, you put in a little work and then you're there. And it can also be pretty cool because at a point, it's like you're actually being taught by these long gone sci-fi authors. So there's a term that's called hard science fiction that it describes a subgenre of sci-fi that emphasizes the real science that bleeds into the fictional science in these stories. And it describes both in great detail in terms of the world building, but that doesn't quite speak to the writing styles, which I dub high science fiction. Basically, just meaning literature that uses outdated styles of writing that conveys complex ideas and stories. So you have hard sci-fi that really emphasizes the science part of it. It digs into the details. It lambasts you with a whole bunch of sci-fi and pseudo science fiction jargon, and it's just one thing after another. Asimov does this a lot. Bradbury does this a lot. Lovecraft, thank goodness, doesn't do this a lot because he's more cosmic horror than he is hardline science fiction. And then high science fiction, it's different from hard science fiction. High science fiction, to me, is just stories that are using what could be described as outdated styles of writing, but they're being used to convey really difficult ideas and really tough to digest stories. Now, more often than not, a lot of high science fiction is hard science fiction because you have a lot more older literature that deals with really complicated stories and ideas, and they are really meticulous and detail-oriented. You find a lot of this with some really classic and popular sci-fi shows as well. Especially the bigger the genre. The bigger the genre, the more that they fit into both these categories. So, Star Trek, Stargate, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica. Almost anything with a star in it, and it's going to fit pretty snugly into both these categories of hard sci-fi and high sci-fi. But a lot more modern science fiction is more hard sci-fi because they may be super detail oriented, but they're easier to understand. It's literature that's written in more modern vernacular. It's using more modern styles of speech, even slang terms or dated references that serve as a sort of a cultural and temporal timestamp here, showing the audience where exactly the author comes from, where the author is in our linear flow of time here. So let's say if I'm reading James Patterson, or I know he's not science fiction, but James Patterson or John Grisham, I can kind of tell where these authors come from, right? They're writing in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. They're not authors from the 30s and 40s, right? They're not authors from the late 1800s. They're not authors from the 2020s. They're early turn of the century authors. And the same can be said for a lot of modern science fiction authors. We can tell where they're from time-wise, century-wise, decade-wise, because of the speech that they use, how they tie ideas together, the structure of their story. Now, hard sci-fi is a lot tougher to read. I just read Dan Simon's Hyperion, Isaac Asimov's The Gods Themselves, and The End of Eternity, which End of Eternity is a little easier to read, but not by much. They throw a ton of detail at you in there, and if you don't pay attention, if you don't read everything really close together, then you'll lose details. I read End of Eternity in between busy times at work, and I'm having to go back and reread previous things in chapters that I've already covered, because there's just so much rich detail that's really, really important to all of the subsequent chapters. So that's hard science fiction for you. Like it I really wish hard sci-fi came with like a separate index, right, where they might refer to a character, a class of character, a time or place, and the index says, "Hey, this is what that is." Say, "Oh, okay, cool. We can move on." But the harder stuff, even without doing the extra work to understand things, it just feels like it takes so much more to dig into. Now, I get so much more easily sidetracked because I can't really get into the meat of the story as I can with the stuff that's easier to read, right? I can read Stephen King a lot easier than I can read Dan Simon or Verne or Asimov. So I highly recommend to everyone to go and bang out a few high science fiction novels that are also hard science fiction. If for any other reason, just to appreciate what we have with our modern literature, I treat it like going to the gym and killing your muscles with super intense workouts that make us appreciate really simple activities. These tough to read monstrous novels will help us breeze through and love more modern sci-fi. So, in a roundabout way, I'm slightly knocking older science fiction, but I'm also praising it at the same time, because I am advocating everyone read it. So, yes, go out and read a few old sci-fi greats. But I'm telling you to, so you can go through your actual novels or series of choice with a lot more ease. You can have a lot more fun with it. It's like you're raising your bench PR from 300 to 365, just so you can go back and lift a comfortable 315. And, just breeze through it. I mean, that's what I do anyway. But that is all the time I have for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning back in. Stick around for more Sci-Fi Unchained. But for now, live long and prosper, my friends. And may the Force be with us all.